Back after the commercials. Okay, so this talk will be very, very different than the other one. So I wanted to somehow summarize a lot of things from HRI and from studies for human-robot interaction about how to build a relationship with a social robot. And while preparing it, I realized we don't know a lot. So I'm going to present things, not my work. Again, as opposed to the other lecture, this is not my work, it's other people's work. So I'm going to present some of the work along different lines of how to create a relationship. Again, hopefully, even though it's not about curiosity, you can still ask questions. But even more so, it will be nice to actually talk in more discussion. Because again, it's not like, we don't know a lot about these things. So I will talk about my personal thoughts on every matter, but there will be a lot of papers here, and again, a lot of references if you want later to dive into all of them. So whatever interests you. And again, stop me. I don't have a lot because I realized we don't have a lot. So some general themes about building a relationship with a social robot. So further, we discussed a little bit before, but there are stages to the relationship. And the first thing is that the first impressions. Okay, the first thing you meet a robot. Okay, there's a lot goes on when you just meet a robot. So you bring a lot from home, from your culture, and from your attitudes, and a lot of all of these things. And I wanted to just mention again, we talked a lot about expectation violation. Is what you think the robot can do, and then it doesn't, really affects how you perceive it and how you interact with it and whether you will interact with it more. So that is something very important. And we also discussed a little bit, but I want to emphasize a lot, the point of the novelty effect is that you may think that your robot is amazing because everybody likes it, but after 3 or 4 times, they don't. So it's very, very important to also in most of the references I will put here, it's one-time interaction. So everything you will see, it's just one-time interaction. And again, it says something, but not everything. And the reason most of them are one-time interaction is because it's very hard to run a long-term study of a specific thing. And again, I know I will talk a lot about a lot of studies, but most of them are the first step. It's not that we know this. No, it's just the first steps. Okay, so you pass this first interaction, you pass the novelty effect. So what we talked about long-term engagement, again, we talk a lot about how to create this long-term engagement. You want to engage with it more, you want to do with it more. And the word trust was mentioned several times before. So we're going to talk a lot about trust and what can promote trust on different levels and different ways and stuff like that. And I've been to I think probably 6, 7 HRI conferences, and again, so a lot of papers. Yeah, I just talked to Jerome a couple of minutes ago. It always surprises me that people are surprised that people treat robots as people. At some point, it should be relatively obvious that, if people talk to other people that are like them, then people will talk to robots more if they're like them. All of these human-human interaction pass a lot to human-robot interaction, and just should stop being surprised. And then it gives us a window because there's a lot of studies on human-human interaction, and we can just take them almost as is to robots and see how we can do. So this is the opening things. So I'm going to go over a lot of issues that I think are important. Some of them and I saw already implemented, but again, I wanted to put some references on them on top. So first, gaze. I cannot overemphasize how gaze is important. It's crazy. It's so crazy that, again, in my startup, first thing you need to do is gaze, that the robot looks at you. That's if you don't have that, you don't have anything. That's it. I mean, they don't care motion. I don't care anything, because if it doesn't look at you, it doesn't recognize you're there, and it just doesn't exist to you, like you said. And it's so, so important.
There are so few people who are doing that. So few robots.
I know. Just to actually just look at you, make eye contact, and it's so important. So I had this robot I talked to you about, Fuzzy, the yellow blob one that taught language in schools. So actually, it wasn't a robot. I lied. It was a puppet. It had no perception whatsoever. It was just a puppet saying some things. And then I realized it didn't work well. So I just put a camera to recognize faces, to detect faces, and just look at him. That's the only thing I did. That's the only perception the robot had, and it made all the difference. Suddenly, children were engaged, and they were looking at him, and it looked at them, and it tracked them. It's so powerful. It's crazy. It's so powerful that I wanted to mention this robot. It's a robotic arm. It doesn't have a face. It doesn't have anything. But they still made this look at you, again, with this arm. And as you can see, like almost all the parameters that you can think of are just higher when that robotic arm is looking at you. There's no face, no eyes, no anything. It's just robotic arm that looks at you. And you have more anthropology, more intimacy, more likability, more intelligence, more everything, just by this robotic arm looking at you, which is, again, crazy. It doesn't have a face. But everything across the board just becomes better if you have this kind of gaze, which is, it's just crazy. So there's also another paper when you have this small talk, which we're going to talk about later, when you have these, small conversations on different things. And again, if you have this, during this small conversation, that you look at the person, the robot looks at the person that he's talking to, again, have all these differences in likability and all these parameters that people just perceive the robot as a better companion. But that's a really cool paper that I never knew before, that if you just do this all the time, it's also creepy. So it's not just you just look at the person all the time, because that's just weird. So you also need to manage it. It's not just looking at you all the time. Okay, again, some informal things about Jibo that from Cynthia, like people like really were, it was, if you know Jibo, it's a robot, it's a single eye, I don't know why, but it has a single eye, and it just tracked people even when they didn't interact with them. So if you walk on your house and it tracks you, and it was, people just describe it as super creepy, you're going out of the bathroom and then this robot looking at you and you then look, it's just creepy. So you have to manage it. It's not just looking at the person all the time. You need to know when to look, when to avert the look, when to look at someone else. And there are other studies. They talk about the SMICbot. So it was a microphone that just had 1 degree of freedom, and there were like 3 people talking in a conversation, and just pointing their microphone to one person made them talk more during the discussion. Again, just giving the attention. And it's a microphone, no face, no robot, no nothing. It's a microphone just looking at someone made that person talk more. And again, that was the concept. The concept to detect who speaks less and to talk more. So only this giving this attention between the different people that are talking can actually increase the engagement, increase the conversation, and increase the interaction, which is something, again, super, super powerful. Also, again, with children, there was a very famous and, again, very super simple experiment where the children interacted with the robot. One robot looked at the child, and one just looked randomly to different places. And then the children were asked, who do you want to learn from more? Who do you trust more to give you information? And they just trusted more the robot that looked at you. Again, it's repetitive, and there are lots more studies. Gaze is like, the minimal thing that you need to have. I mean, if you don't have this, you don't have anything. You need more, but you also need to manage this. And also, we started a study where in this robot facilitator, we have this robot and a group. Who should you look at when? Again, it's not that trivial. Do you look at the person who's talking? Because, you want to back channel, you're talking, it's good that you're talking. Or do you want to look at someone else whom you want to talk later? And how much do you look at each one? Again, if you look only at one person all the time, it's also no. And it's crazy, we looked for, studies in humans. There's a group of humans and there's another human facilitator who should look. There are no studies on that. It just, we don't know. There's no algorithm of the best gaze to look at, okay? So that will be a major theme in all my conversation, in all my talk today. We don't know anything. So we have the first steps, but we don't know a lot. But with robots, we can start studying it a very structured way. Who should we look at that actually achieves the best dynamics that you want? So gaze, super, super crazy important, and again, first step. This is something I really love, and I saw it in that robot before. And it's even rarer. It's so rare I couldn't find it. I found 2 or 3 papers. It's called entrainment. Entrainment is when you do something that the other person is doing. It's known, I think, from Steve Jobs that he walked like this, and then all his employees started to walk like this. Or there's a lot of studies on, again, human-human interaction when you start to behave a little bit like the person you're with. Small behaviors, like nodding in the same way, smiling in the same way, speaking in the same way. You're doing these small subconscious behavioral adjustments, and there's tons of studies that show that if you do that, people like you more. The person you're imitating will like you more because of this. So it's super powerful. Again, I found like dozens of papers that show if you adjust your pitch, adjust your facial expression, adjust your small things, then people will like you more. The people you're imitating will like you more. So this is another very powerful thing. I saw it again in this robot. If you do, right, in that robot you do something like this and the robot does something like this, it automatically, you see that it's easier and it interacts with you. So people try to do that. So for example here, they adapted the pitch and the prosody. So they detected in real time the pitch of the person speaking. And then the robot shifted its pitch to match the other person's to actually increase likability and stuff like that. And that actually becomes like actually not as easy problem for AI to actually detect all of this in real time and try to adapt it in a very small way. You don't want to suddenly shift a lot of things. You need to figure out how to like have small changes that people won't notice. Again, it's not like a conscious behavior. It's like a unconscious behavior, which is really cool. And again, there's another paper that said that matching facial expression and head movement. So they had to walk with this robot, and one of the conditions, you made some faces to the robot, and the robot again made the same faces to you. And again, just mimicked you while you were walking with it, and then they asked which robot do you prefer. And again, no one told them that was the condition, and they preferred all the robots that actually mimicked you a little bit. And again, not surprisingly, these papers reflect human-human interaction papers. But again, these are like almost the only ones I saw. And I think there's like a hidden trove here, like a treasure box that no one even started to work with, because it's so powerful in humans that you can start. And again, we have the AI for it now to recognize this facial expression slowly and to change the prosody and even like small movement. Everybody has these small quirks. You move like this, you move like this. Everybody moves a little bit. And if the robot just slowly tries to move like you will like it more. Again, very, very powerful, I think. There's other types of entrainment which I like. I don't have the paper here, but it's called lexical entrainment. It's like, if it's the words that I use, the vocabulary that I use, then you will start using it if you like interact with me enough. So this is there's actually a paper where a robot slowly shifted its vocabulary, and then the children are shifting their vocabulary to the robot and actually learn new vocabulary for it, which is cool. So it's like always changing what you're doing based on what the other is doing, and you can again you can make a lot of interaction with it, a lot of engagement and interaction with it. Okay, you need to ask questions or say something at some point, because I have yeah. Okay, at some point, not necessarily now. Okay, keep in mind that you can ask questions, and okay, good, because I'm moving way too fast. I will finish too quickly. Yeah, here. You need to ask questions. The Q&A is built in within this talk. Okay, never mind. So entrainment is something that I really, really like. We started talking about personalization, which is, again, super important. But that's actually very hard. It's much harder than gaze, I think. It's much harder. So again, there are like different types of personalization. So usually, again, in education, we talk about personalization. Is the content you present, like recommender system. You personalize everything you say and you talk to that specific person. Like intelligent tutoring system that personalize the content to each one of the person, the exercises. If you're good at something, then you advance much faster. If you're not good at something, then you stay there. So you personalize the content. And there is this really, really, really cool paper where they had this math tutor for children, but they had a lot of personalization. So this personalization where the robot says the name of the child all the time, which is again something super powerful. But the other thing is that they asked the child what topics they like, sports or cars or whatever, and then the examples they gave for teaching were taken from that content. And that was super powerful, again, because it created curiosity and engagement in that context because it was specialized and personalized to that specific child, to what that child liked. And this year's HRI, they actually did a follow-up experiment on this one, when they actually did a break, like a very long break, like a couple of months breaks in school, and they reintegrated the robot again, and they showed that even after the break, the personalized robot was much more liked and preferred than the non-personalized robot. So it's very long-term interaction, and even after a break. So children remembered that kind of interaction and that kind of personalization, and actually remember it and preferred it more. So, and that's why it's called memory-based personalization, because you actually remember the previous conversations, and you remember what they actually talked and what they said, and you can bring it back again. Logistics is also important. I don't have a slide on that. So again, using this memory-based, again, I think it's very hard. Maybe in GPT era it's much easier, but it's still very hard to actually know exactly when to put that piece of information from previous conversation in this conversation. But if you manage to do that, and then the person sees the robot remembers you, and it's not just, again, not like a tool, but actually some kind of memory and interaction remembers you. So that's something very cool. And again, we talked about a little bit about my paper about affective personalization, where we actually have this reinforcement learning, where it's not just remembering stuff, but actually changing the behavior of the robot based on the preferences of the child and learning it. So here they pre-programmed it, right? There's no learning here. You take this one word of what the person is saying and plug it in another place. And in my work, you actually need to learn how the robots behave. And again, you can think of a lot of ways that this robot can change its behavior in order to accommodate that person's, that specific person. Again, facial expressions, movement, what it says. And the weird thing about this reinforcement learning base is that you have a weird period in all the time in reinforcement learning where you have trial and error. And again, in reinforcement learning is weird because you fail. It's not you're not doing optimization. You're doing trial and error. You try a lot of things and you figure out what's good or bad. Let me put ethics. I will talk about ethics a little bit, not a lot. So there is a problem with trial and error and social robots because they can do horrible things if you just let them try and error. So you have to put boundaries on what they can really try. And like what's they mentioned, if you take this robot and say, hey, let's just try everything, it won't be good. So you need to constrain the action space that you can do so that the exploration can never be really bad. It can be less good because you're trying different, you don't know what's good or bad, but it shouldn't be bad. It should be good or less good. So this is something very important on reinforcement learning. Because I'm going to talk about this, so I'm going to talk about how I hacked it. It's not nice. So in all learning, there's something called the learning rate. There's a parameter that says learning rate. Usually it's very small because you want small changes to accumulate over a long period of data, and you don't want to do it. So as I mentioned before, in human HRI, you don't have a lot of data. So I put the learning rate so high that I would fail the test, like no one will give me the course. I put it so high that if someone actually read the paper, that it's no good. But I put it so high so it will actually change. Like almost after every action and everything, the policy, the behavior will change because we have so much sparse data. And it's okay, and you can see that it changes, it adapts, but it will not be optimally converging to the solution that the computer scientists are used to, because this is just not the right domain. Reinforcement learning in HRI just doesn't work out of the box. You have to do a lot of tweaks because it just doesn't work. You don't have a lot of data. So this about personalization. Yes, question. Yes.
I was wondering if you know some work on personalization regarding the personality of the robot, the interaction style of the robot, like using, for example, just personality types and robot more extroverted or introverted.
So to change the personality of the robot?
Yes. Do you know?
No, I don't know of any that you want to change the personality of the robot based on something from the user, from the humans.
Like users that we prefer, for example.
Sounds really cool. No, I don't know of any. Again, this personalization, changing the robot's behavior based on the user interaction is again very understudied. There aren't a lot of studies that actually change the actual behavior Because again, usually all of these studies must be long-term. You can't do in one interaction change the robot. That won't work. So this study, for example, was 2 months, every day in a kindergarten for like 4 or 5 hours. I don't know if, again, it's a huge study. It's very, very hard. So it's very rarely done. So it's a really cool interaction, a really cool suggestion. And I think, again, you have this concept, which I think will be very interesting, inspired by this work, is to actually like map personality space. I know that works with like a continuous 3-dimensional space of personality, and then try to move it slowly to match what is the personality good for each person. Again, and I must put the ethics again, is like, I'm not sure we want to have complete freedom, because if some person likes, I don't know, abusive partner, I'm just saying, like, you need to put that extrovert, it's weird about what we actually want, because some people don't know what they need or what they want, even though they think. So for example, in the robot that gives, that promotes growth mindset, I'm not sure most of the children will prefer that. If you ask them what they prefer, this robot will always say you're smart, and this robot will always say try harder. Which one do you want to play with now? I'm not sure all the people will select the one try harder, right? But this is better for them. It promotes this growth mindset. So there is a very, very ethical concept here of how much do you want to adapt to what the person wants, and how much you actually know from studies what's good and bad, again, ethically.
In our ethical rules at Enchanted Tools, we don't want necessarily to adapt all the time to the user.
Yes.
Because we think that the robot should be editorialized. So this means that we have a choice,
yes,
as a robot productor to do, and basically it's an artistic choice about what this robot is and how it should behave for different kind of reason, but at least for a certain consistency in what it is. Do you want somebody that is changing and adapting himself all the time to you? It will be very strange and it could be freaky, and it's like a plastic behavior that do not allow yourself to define yourself in regard of somebody else. The robot should be somebody else, not me.
No, it's not just you, but it also be not too fluid, like you said. You don't want, there are no people that, like a chameleon that always shifts and changes and stuff. You want it to have some consistency and some base. So I totally agree. So we don't want to have like, personality changing robot, right? Because it will be too weird. And again, also, when you build a character, you build a personality. You don't want it to radically change because it fits another person. So that's a little bit weird. Again, and I don't know, maybe you can have, and again, that's something what we wanted to do with this fuzzy robot, is that to have different characters. Like really, like each one of them doesn't change, but you can select which character to play with. So that's another option that we thought about. Okay, you have like, so actually we had like these three, you have this tutti, which was like a perky strawberry. We had this blue jay, which is like a, an older bird that's very stern. And had this fuzzy, which is like a mellow yellow blob. So we intentionally had very different types of personalities. So that, again, in the vision, we didn't implement it, but the child can select which one to play with. Because also you can maybe, on this day you want this kind of personality, and on that day you want that kind of personality, because, we woke up badly or something. So that was our solution. You can actually select which one you play with.
Sorry, the storytelling of the robot is also a way to define how the robot should behave.
Definitely.
I am now surprised that robot designer do not try to define this background story coming with the robot, because it's a very good way to make a robot consistent and not changing all the time, but to behave in the way it should behave because of the background.
Yeah. So yes.
Don't you think that this has to be task-oriented? If we play together, if I have as a robot to learn something, if I have to let you discover some things, listening some things, and so on. So according to the task.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah, I totally agree. But again, it's like the task should change a little bit, but the personality of the robot cannot change just because it's a different task. If it's the same robot, because otherwise, again, it's not consistent. It has a problem of.
You have some, how to say, prototype. A teacher should have this kind of, the kid knows that. But if the robot does not has the teacher place,
Yeah.
between the interaction, this will not be correct.
Yeah. Again, with children, it's a little bit different because they can switch things. You know, they can have a puppet that is not alive and doesn't move, but they can, you know, instill a lot of personality into it. And also, they're used to like changing between, you know, you have this kindergarten teacher and then the parent and another parent, which are totally different, you know, behaving totally differently. So they're really used to like switching between different people. I'm not sure how adults will behave when the robot suddenly becomes different when you're doing different things with them, because we still believe in like this consistency of this character. So if you have this robot, again, if it helps you in the kitchen, it behaves in one place, but if it plays with you, it's suddenly, you know, totally quirky and totally different something else. I think it will create some kind of problem in your story of it. But I want to also relate to this backstory. And this is something we can talk a lot about, is that everybody knows it's a robot. It's not a real backstory, right? It's something we invented for the character. And we need to put, as users, some kind of, you know, imagination of ourselves that it makes sense. And it's just not simple to do that. How to maintain between, like, it's totally fiction, it doesn't make any sense to me, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's a robot and it should just be a tool to help me. And we need to find like this weird place in the middle where it still makes sense, but it's not really fictional, doesn't make any sense at all, but you still have a story. It's a very, very sweet spot that is very hard to find. Yeah, excellent. So this is where to find it. Excellent, good. Yes.
This is more of a comment also to know what you think about it. When I see those examples of personalization, especially even in social cues and what's the preference of people, one thing that sticks to my mind is a lot of something I also mentioned in the morning, like, what is your reward time? Like, are we talking about reward at this exact moment and then we're changing our behavior all the time? Or are we talking about rewards over a long period, like on a day or over many days, months, so on and so forth? And then I remember, I think it's been a few months ago, even the keynote talk in HRI on Google, my English was talking about retaining knowledge during the day
And then in the
rewarding
night.
something for your models and policies for the next day, right? Then with this in context, the one example that comes to my mind is that teaching. Let's say we have a group of people that we're trying to teach with, we have an approach or policy.
Yeah.
There. And then we realize over a few days or months that it's not getting to them. And then you could still have something, you still have your personality, but you could change some cues or ways of doing that for that particular group. And I think the thing that is key there is subtle changes, as, I don't know, prosody or speech, the way they speak, but over a long time period so that people retain it.
Yeah.
What do you think about this idea of not changing our behavior right away, but over a long period to get more, to retain better that?
So there are two things. Here's first of all, it's I'll talk about the time itself. So first of all, reinforcement learning has this discount factor, if you know a little bit algorithm. So it's not like the reward now affects now and that's it. Usually you get future accumulated rewards. So the actions that you do now may affect something in the future, and that's okay, and you accumulate all of this information a long time. So it's not just, if I do something and I get reward, then I'm doing this thing more. It's more about how this behavior affects the entire future. So that can integrate over a long period of time of what actually works and doesn't work, and not just immediately. So this is for the time. For the other thing, what you said is that you can have the actions, the definition. Okay, reinforcement learning, because you asked and it's important. Okay, there are 3 things in reinforcement learning, which all of them are super crucial. One of them is the state space, which means what does the robot know about the human in front of it? Because if you know things, that you can react to them. If you don't know, you don't react to it. So if you have the facial expressions, you can react to it. If you have like physiological data, heart rate and stuff, then you can, react better. You know more information. I now have a study where I have brain waves as my state, which is actually super cool. But again, you can know more about it. So defining the state space of what you know, it's super important. The second thing is the action space. And this is what you said. So you can have the action space as the personality. So the robot can change the personality and see what happens. Or you can have these subtle cues of prosody or pitch or what we have, like just one sentence or the other. It's not real personality. It's like just selecting between different persons, with different sentences. So the question is, what is your action space? You can do it very, very big. One study that we have, like a different behavior. One where I'm lifting the hand and doing something like this, and one I'm not doing anything. So this is a very different behavior. But you can have the action space to be very subtle, which again makes effects. It's weird, but even subtle things can make effects. So this is your action space, which is very important. And then the reward, what you actually want to get. Do you want to get more engagement? Do you want to have more fun? Do you want to get, I don't know, you need to understand what you actually want to achieve and put that in the reward. So reinforcement learning is very hard. You need to redefine a lot of things. Nowadays, reinforcement learning means, okay, put all the data of the internet inside. I want people to be happy. Let's go. Okay, no, that doesn't work. Again, in robots, that doesn't work. It's a really good question, and it was really hard to do it here, to define what is the state space, what's the action space. It's just not easy. Yes, great. Any more questions? No. Let's move to another thing. Yes, okay, so rapport building and trust. Again, super, super important. We talked about trust before a little bit. So, for example, if you want to build trust, small talk apparently is important. And again, it's weird to have a small talk with a robot, I think. I didn't do it a lot lately. But I don't know, with ChatGPT and agents now, it's becoming more, making more sense to have a small talk with a robot. But again, this study is Justin Castle is amazing, and she's doing amazing work. Mapped really different paths between small talk and trust. Again, the point of trust is what we talked before, is to reduce risk, reduce unpredictability, and to actually understand what's going on, and to trust that what you have is what you get. So, for example, you have the storytelling and the knowledge of trust behavior, and again, if the robot is tells a story about itself, and you see that it's consistent, then you can build trust. You can build a common ground, which means that if you understand that the robot understands you, you're talking about the same things in the environment, you're talking about the same things, then that creates familiarity. If you're talking about like an experience, and then he's talking about experience, so you have like an object in the environment, you both talk about it, you can talk about the same things. Okay, so you build a common ground, so you can create familiarity. It means that you can trust it because you understand that it understands you. It's the same concept. And then there's another thing of solidarity. It's like it's to create empathy. Again, a little bit of empathy. It's like avoiding face rates. Like we talked a little bit about anonymity and judgment. Also, is that you don't want the robot to react to something that you feel embarrassing. Or something that if you do something that is like a little bit weird and suddenly the robot reacts to that, then it will break the trust. So you want not to do that. So it's avoiding all of these weird reactions to something that you do that you don't want to be reacted to. And again, you can build this into an agent and start to create more trust. And again, they had this talking about just small talk, about food and about travel and about, just talking about small stuff with a robot. Again, actually, create trust. And you can have the interaction duration is better. You have more positive responses. You have a lot of more rapport with the robot when you actually have this kind of small talk interaction. Also, what they did in the third study is whether you have, again, we talked about consistency. So they had like these two types of interaction, like 2 time periods of interaction, and either interacted with the same robot, was actually now in a paper, or you didn't interact with the same robot. And again, if you interacted with the same robot, you have more and more trust. So you have more trust if you interacted twice with the same robot than twice with 2 times with different robots, which is again weird because it's a robot and it's AI. It doesn't really matter if it's a paper or a now. It has no difference whatsoever in the real world, right? In reality, it doesn't matter if it's a now or a paper or if they change. But for us, it does matter, okay? So it's all of these things that I'm talking about. It's not the real world, it's our perception of the real world, okay? So for us, it's important that this robot remains the same, okay? There's also, again, stories about Japan, and they had these robot dogs, okay, that they actually, I don't know, we saw an amazing talk in HRI where they actually have cafes with robot dogs, okay? So everybody brings their robot dogs to this cafe, and they're playing together. There's like a pen for the robot dogs, and they're celebrating birthdays for the dogs with the robot cakes or something. I don't know. It was really weird. But again, it's like the whole social life of you have a robot for yourself. But what is related here for consistency is like a robot dog we know malfunctioned, and someone brought it to repair, and someone said, okay, I'll replace it to you. I'll give you a new one. So, no, that's my dog. Don't replace it, fix it. Okay, so you want this consistency, again, even though it doesn't make any sense. Because you can download the software and put it in a new robot, everything will be the same. But you feel this connection to this physical.
More weirdly, I saw the same thing in a paper with robots that disarm bombs. And then soldiers, when they lose the robot, they
Yes.
repair.
Yeah, no, it's worse than that. They risk their own lives to save the robots. Yes, I mean, the whole point of a robot, like in the army, is to save human lives. And then they risk their own life to save the robot, which is, again, totally doesn't make any sense at all, on any level. But that's the bonding you have because and again it's this robot. It's because he had this. We had a lot of, again, we have a lot of studies on empathy. So again, one weird study that someone did when I was in MIT. There's like a hex bug. Okay, it's like a small robot that looks like a bug, like a cockroach. And they gave this robot and a hammer and okay, destroy the robot. Smash the robot. But they had like several conditions. One of them, they said, okay, this is the robot we had in the lab, crush it. The other condition, this is Martin. He was in our lab for the last 6 months. Now destroy it. And there was a huge delay, and some people didn't want to destroy it. Just, this one sentence of actually having a backstory to it that people make, no, I don't, and also it's horrible, it's a cockroach robot. It's like, you want to destroy it. But I'm just saying, so there's a lot of thing of a backstory in what you put into this robot in your mind. Again, it's not real. It's just in your mind that you suddenly have this empathy toward this robot. And someone asked, again, this physical presence. So they compared a computer, Alexa, and Jibo. Guess who did that study? And they showed that, again, the physical presence builds more rapport and more likability. Again, they did the same study, but only with this physical presence. And the physical presence itself also adds more interaction and more rapport and more likability and more stuff like that. So this is about this conversation and about interaction that builds interaction. Any more questions about this? Okay, let's go another one. Okay, self-disclosure, super important to things that maybe you do. It's again with the elderly, more with the elderly, but also for self-disclosure. So self-disclosure that means that your willingness to open up to the robot and talk about your personal stuff and stuff like that. It's a different level of interaction and trust between you and the robot because you actually talk about your personal things. And they had this both study and also a very big paper on sharing with, why do we do it and how does it make us feel? So with robots. So they had these 3 key concepts about reciprocity is that when we talk about it, then the robot needs to acknowledge that we're talking about it, like both in back channeling and also discussing it. So it needs to come back to you. You can't just talk to the robot. The robot needs to react to what you're saying in order for you to continue to self-disclose. So that is something very important, to have this cycle, like we talk about cycle, that it's not just you talking to the robot, but the robot also acknowledging you and making this cycle. The other thing which is very cool, which I didn't know before reading this robot, is that if you're sharing positive things, it's then easier to self-disclose than the negative things. So if you start to share, and the robot also like talking about good things, then it increases your self-disclosure. So you can feel better when you're starting to disclose positive things and not just negative things. And we talked a little bit about this anonymity of lack of judgment, which is super important, that you know that no one else is listening and the robot will not judge you of what you're saying. So these three concepts are very important for you to open up to the robot. Whether we want people to open up to the robot is a totally different question. I'm not sure what I want. I have like a robot for children. I'm not sure how I feel about children opening up and taking what happens in their home to the robot, because I don't know how to react to that. And it's not a simple question. Again, lots of ethical issues regarding all of this, building a relationship with robots, huge ethical considerations. Anything else? No question. Okay. Okay, this is one I like. To err is robot. This is the name of the paper, right? To err is robot, which is cool. So people like robots more if they do errors. Okay? And that is something really cool, because usually we don't like errors, or we think we don't like errors, and we don't associate robot with errors. Or robots, or when you say about a person he's like a robot, it means he doesn't make mistakes. Okay? But again, what I take, I'll talk a little bit about these two things, but what I take from this is that we like humans. So we want the robots to be a little bit human-like. If they're totally, don't make mistakes at all, and are always correct and know everything, we hate those kind of people that know everything about anything and that never make mistakes. We don't like them. So we like people, sometimes make mistakes and sometimes a little bit goofy, and we like those kind of people. So now these two papers actually show that we actually like those robots also that makes mistakes. And in this paper, they actually had two types of mistakes. One is technical, so they just made a mistake when they need to solve a puzzle, and the other one is like violating a social norm, like just saying, okay, instead of telling the task, it's just throw these things away, like just saying something very weird or totally inappropriate or stuff like that. And again, what you asked about the task. So usually you want a robot that builds an IKEA thing for you to not make an error. You won't like it that much. But if it's a manageable error, then you like it. Again, I will continue this with my paper. So we actually studied irrational robots. So you know about irrationality. I'll tell you like 2 sentences about irrationality. I'll ask you what's the probability of A. I'll ask you what's the probability of B. And then I'll ask you what's the probability of A and B. So 70% of the people, 70% of the time will tell that probability of A and B is bigger than the probability of A, which obviously is mathematical. It cannot be that the probability of A and B is larger than the probability. It cannot be. But people will make that mistake, and that is irrationality. So we actually created like we created 2 types of robots. The 2 robots. One of them always said rational things, okay, with no violation of probabilities, and the other ones always said irrational things, okay. So and what we discovered there, I thought that people would prefer this irrational robot all the time. I was wrong, which is fun about science. It's to be wrong. It depends on the task. So if the task is very rational, for example, we had like a detective story that someone is, a thief, and you need to find a thief, then they didn't want the irrational more. But if it was something about an art, an appreciation of art, and something more soft, then they would prefer the irrational more. So this is something very related to what you said, is that it's not that one size fits all. We only want irrational robots. We only want robots that make mistakes. That's not correct. We need to find exactly what's the scenario and what's the time and what's the place to actually, do this kind of thing to make them likable but still, functional.
Yeah. At Enchanted Tools, we are working on what we call natural interaction programming, and one reason for that is we discover that if the robot is doing an error, so people react, as you said, it could be accepted, but it could also annoy at some time. But it gives you a complete over feeling if you are the reason of the error. Let me give you an example. Once we were working on a robot, and I asked to the robot, anytime you see somebody, say hello. Yeah. So then the robot say okay, I understand the rules, and later on somebody came in front of that robot, and the robot says hello, 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 hello,
Yeah.
hello, hello, hello. So that was very funny. We all laughed, and I feel like I was the reason why he was
Yeah.
taking, you know, and I was very emotionally engaged to that robot, and then I try to interact with it, to teach him how he should behave a better way. So error, if it's
Yes,
coming
it's
from
from
you,
you, yeah.
it's stronger.
Yeah.
In terms of emotional impact.
And also there's another element that if you build something, then you have more strongly affect towards it.
Yeah.
So it feels like you programmed this kind of thing, so you feel more emotionally attached to it. That's actually something we do with our robots in my startup, is that we have some accessories to the robot, and we ask the children to just dress up the robot. Put ears and a cape. It doesn't matter. But once you do that, you own the robot. And the children suddenly feel much more connection to it, simply because they just put something, again, totally non-functional, it doesn't change anything about anything, but just because they did something to the robot, they changed the robot, suddenly it becomes their own, and they have much more engagement and much more motivation. So the minute you are part of the robot, or you are part of this, then you suddenly feel much more engaged. Yes?
Do you think this has something to do with trust calibration? Because like the robot makes a mistake, then you expect it to do less. And then when you have more realistic expectations in what it can do, and so you like it more in the end?
Again, it's a very good question about the expectations, because again they made like really weird errors. On the one hand, on our study, for example, it was totally imperceptible, because there were two robots. They didn't say this one is irrational and this one is rational. They couldn't even detect it, but they still preferred one of them. So it's not about expectation, because they actually didn't even notice that. And in the other one, it was so overt, so obvious that they made a mistake. So it's not. So sometimes like these mistakes that are sometimes small, and you discover what are the boundaries of what the robot can or cannot do, then it relates to expectations. In these two studies, it was not related. Yes.
You mentioned that if you do something to the robots, you feel more attached to it.
Yes.
Did you study also when you light the robots and shut it down?
Ooh, yeah. Shutting down a robot is a traumatic event. There are a lot of studies about this that you can again, it's related to empathy, like the hammer, but less so. But if you put a robot inside a closet when it's done, then some people will not agree to do that. It's because it's like closing it down. Shutting down a robot is something you need to take very, very careful of, because you don't shut down a person.
Yeah. Starting also is.
So starting, it means that it's off. So someone shut it down before you started it.
I agree, but there's a lot of people, especially in education, who think that in front of a kid or in front of people, you have to show that this is a piece of hardware.
Yes.
And then you must turn it on. But it has been always strange for me, because I do not understand.
No, so I'll tell you what we did. So what we did when I was in MIT, and this is again only unique to children. It's very weird. So they interacted with the robot, they liked it, and then we took off the skin. The dragon bat, we took off the skin, they saw the inside of the robot. Oh my God, it's a robot. And then we put on the skin, and that's it. They reacted as if it's a friend again. Because they have this suspense of disbelief. If you think about children again, they have these toys that don't move, right? But they play with it as if it's a whole character and they can do whatever they want. So they have this weird thing that it's okay that it's a robot. I can still invite it to a picnic, right? That's what they did. But I think children are a little bit different in that way, that they can do this shift very easily. For adults, I don't know. If you suddenly, I don't know, it's weird.
So the paper you are mentioning about is for adults. the one that is the danger of turning off a robot.
Yeah, then you go for for children. I don't think the ethics committee will allow me to do that.
So that's
yeah. So what I want to say about turning off a robot? Yeah, I don't know. We are like in Nature this year another paper on something very weird about robots talking about mortality, and that they will never die, but you will, and whether it's good or bad. I don't know, like something about this, again, turning off a robot, and it's like very weird that you can suddenly think about robots, about things. I have to say something about these irrational robots because it doesn't relate to anything at all, but I have to say something about it. So initially, the study that I said was quantum irrationality, because I love quantum physics. So the problem with irrationality is like this. Again, as I told you, it's a violation of math, right? So psychologists thought that the humans are the problem, and they, had these psychological theories and got a Nobel Prize for it. Physicists came and said, no, the people are okay, but the math is wrong. And they used quantum probability theory. When quantum probability theory, there's no problem that the probability of A and B is bigger than the probability of A. So they built a whole field called quantum cognition, which means that you use quantum theory to explain all irrationality of people. And they actually succeed, and they find even evidence in the brain that the quantum probability theory actually explain more about brain activities than other things. It doesn't mean that we have quantum thingies in the brain, we don't. But it's just another theory to explain our behavior, which is very cool. So initially, we actually had the quantum irrational robots. So the robots were like their behavior was dictated by quantum math, which was really cool. But I just had to say that because it was super cool. It was one of these grants I just said before. It was one of these grants, the quantum irrational social robots, that there's like 2 people in the world that can understand what I just said. So I think they gave me the money because they just didn't understand what was written there. So like it seems okay, I don't know. So that was really cool. So this is about errors. Okay, other stuff. Breathing. It appears that breathing is important. Again, if you just, I think breathing, again, it's the same arm thing, but you just, have this breathing behavior. And again, you suddenly, across the board, people like them more, they think it's more anthropomorphized. Everything is good when you have this breathing. I think it's this concept of always alive. The robot should never stop moving. So breathing is like this natural thing that you always move, and then you think it's more alive, and you like it more, it's more natural. So this concept of never standing still, which is something I think very, very, very important. But again, it's just really cool to have this. And again, it's a robotic arm that moves. It's nothing natural at all. Humor. Humor is cool. We had in HRI now having a stand-up comedy for like an hour. It was one of the funniest things I ever saw. It was really, really cool. So this study showed, for example, that humor can be as an icebreaker. So like it's before the interaction that you have like humor and something like that, and suddenly people like it more. And it was more than during the task you're playing joke, but just as an icebreaker. So this is something really cool. And also in this kind of medical settings, and again, they have this first interaction with the robot, and then you have some kind of interviews, and then you have another interaction with that you have humor or not, and then you have this medical interaction. And again, never mind the numbers, it's very weird how they show it, but that's what I found. So again, they have more, perceptions of robot empathy was higher with this humor kind of robot and not with this non-humor kind of robot. Humor, again, is tricky. It can be just really bad. And it's totally cultural dependent, and you have a lot of pitfalls in humor. What we did with the avatar and with the robot facilitator, so we did for the robot facilitator, we gave it a course. We took a course on on facilitation. And after every class, we just program what the teacher said. And one of the things said that attention span of humans is very short. So you need to break every like 15 minutes with some kind of break. And she said that humor is good. So we did these horrible jokes every 15 minutes, like super crazy horrible. It was just, just people laughed out of embarrassment for the robots more than from the joke itself. But it totally broke, the monotony of the interaction and the lesson. At some point, just to, again, anecdote of how people anthropomorphize the robot, even though it doesn't. So we had like the discussion of like 3 girls that, just, fought about the answer. It should be A, no, it should be B, and they quickly yelled at each other. And then the robot started telling a joke. And then the children said, wow, he realized we were fighting and he wanted to like make us, stop fighting. No, it was just 15 minutes. It was like, there's no algorithm. I'm not listening to you. I have no idea what you're saying. But they think, oh my God, he's so smart. He just made us, stop fighting and work together better. So again, but humor is also something very cool, very tricky, but very cool. Yes. Okay, this is something that I like because it's mine. Again, this is like, more far-fetched and AI for good and stuff like that. But if you like promote things that are known to be good for well-being and for your life, then even if people don't want it, it's still good for them, and it's still good for the interaction. So like I said, if you promote curiosity, then then people will be more curious also for the robot and for other stuff and with the robot. And even if they don't know it, then curious people, when they're curious, are just happier. It's very hard to be sad when you're curious and learning new stuff that you want to learn. So just by promoting this kind of stuff, you can make people happier with the robot. Also with this growth mindset, right? This growth mindset, you overcome obstacles better. So if the robot somehow can promote this over a long period of time, then suddenly the people will feel better and feel more well-being and more stuff with the robot because of the robot. So that's something that is very important in a relationship. Usually you want to be with people that makes you feel good. And not just, on this once, but generally make you feel good, that believe in you, that make you laugh on one hand, but believe in yourself on the other hand. You want people to, give you good energies, and you want to be with people like that. So if a robot can give you all of these things, then you will want to be more with this robot that believes in you. And also there's actually now studies on how to deliberately well-being, you practice your breathing and do this kind of thing in the moment, and a lot of like how to promote well-being with a social robot. And again, these studies, all of these studies are very anecdotal, right? I mean, this study is studying growth mindset. But if you put all of this together in like an interaction with a full robot that is with you all the time or something like that, then it can be super powerful. It's not just this one study. It's like really put all of it into one comprehensive place. So this, I think, is... No one obviously done it. Actually, my biggest complaint for HRI, the community, and hopefully here it will be the solution, is that there's no integration. Tons of studies, amazing studies, but no one is integrating all of it into one robot. And it's such a shame, because it's obviously better if you have all of this in one robot than to just study, growth mindset.
Yeah, that was spectacular to see at the HRI, that in the company's exhibition room, there were almost no complete robot trying to do the job.
Yes.
And we were the only one, and that's the good news, because we are coming, and we have no real competitor.
Yeah. No, it's great. No one is trying to integrate stuff. And there's a lot of knowledge there that you can put in, but no one is integrating it. So actually, I'm almost in the end. So I want to summarize. Like, you can have a lot of non-verbal behaviors we talked about, like gaze and breathing and entrainment. A lot of, again, most of them are like subconscious. You don't actually see them, but they make a lot of, it makes more connection with the robot. And you have a lot of verbal behaviors. And again, all of these studies were pre-ChatGPT era. Everything has changed now when you can have whatever you want in the conversation. But again, small talk and memory-based personalization and humor are, again, really cool stuff. And again, these global behaviors of personalization to the person we talked a lot about, and his promotion of good traits that makes you feel good. And now I want to conclude just on my personal thoughts, which there's no study on at all, but I think they're cool, and I love it that I see most of it here, is I always think about like a boring person. Okay, I don't want my robot to be a boring person. Okay, a boring person is that when you meet him, said, how was your day? It's okay, I went to work, came back, a little bit tired, went to sleep. Okay, it's a boring person. He doesn't have any life, didn't do anything. What did you do? Oh my God, I went to South America, I did bungee jumping from an airplane, I don't know. Like, it's someone that had actually a life of its own that is not related to you, that it can tell a story that you don't know. But all the robots today, again, except here, all the robots today, yay, all the robots today, when you were not there, are off. And when you come back, you had a whole life, but they didn't. And when you start talking to them, they have nothing to contribute because nothing happened to them, right? They were in the house, off, or in the closet. I don't know, but nothing happened to them. So think of a person, you know, you go off, you go back, you know, you go back, how was your day? I was in the closet all day. It's a, you know, it's a really horrible story, but also boring. Okay, so the whole point of having a life of something could contribute to conversation, but, and again, in the ChatGPT era, it's very different than knowing everything in the world. Knowing everything in the world and having a life, it's not the same thing. Because you can confuse the two. Right? You can start talking to ChatGPT now, and it will know everything about everything, and whatever you want to talk, it will talk about, and it will be okay. But that's not a life of its own. It's totally different. So that's something no one has ever done, even in a study, even close. I think in the...
Does it mean that we are developing, we are designing robot with psychological disorder? Because if the only reason to talk for the robot is you, all the time, the only robot to live is you. It sounds like being
obsessive about, yeah.
Totally.
I think that the movie Her had that one thing, right? So he suddenly discovers that she has a life of her own. It didn't end well, but never mind. That's the whole point. The second thing is also, I mean, we have cool people and we have non-cool people. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, okay? We want our robot to be the cool people, the cool person, right? The person that you want. So we need to like think what makes a cool person, right? Something that's energetic and you know, energetic and positive and doing things. And so again, because people treat robots as people, and that, for me, it's like proven beyond any doubt, then we just need to think about what is the coolest person and what does she do in order to be so cool, and put that in a robot. Again, it's not a solved problem, but this is a way to think about. And again, in the end, is that we want to make people better people. I mean, we want to make people's lives better. Not just life, but also to make them better people to other people. Like you said, like to think about the other, and not just about myself. So somehow, again, put all of this inside the robot. Again, it's a huge task because there's so many things to do. But that's why I love robots. Because it's complex and not simple. Actually, that's the end of my talk.
I have a tricky question
Yes.
for you. So if we implement all of this, like make people better people, if we use intelligent things, if we make the robot behaviors being natural and instinctive for user, and especially if there is no story like what we have, so basically another robot than ours. Do you think the robot is more on the side of appearance of intelligence, appearance of conscience, or do you think they are, or we should say that they are intelligent or conscient or sentient?
Oh, you want to go into consciousness, really? Okay.
Yeah, tell me what you think about that. Should we say appearance of conscience?
So there was actually a good paper on that on HRI about the illusion of theory of mind. It was a really good paper because if you talk to ChatGPT and you give them like this small test of theory of mind, it will pass the test. I mean, ChatGPT will show you that it knows that you think differently and you have empathy. It will show. But what that paper showed is that if you try to trick it, it will immediately fall apart. And people will not fall apart. But any deviation you make from one thing, suddenly everything falls apart in these kind of AIs because they don't have theory of mind, because it's an illusion of theory of mind, and they're like approximating it, so it's not real. From my perspective, consciousness is not a scientific question because you can't measure it, and therefore I don't care because I'm a scientist. And from the complete other perspective, I don't care if they have consciousness. I care if I think that they have consciousness. Because if I treat them as if they have consciousness, then I don't care if they have it or not. So it's all about the illusion. It's like I think 20 examples that I gave here that the robots are super stupid, but the people think they're not. And that's enough for me. I don't need anything else. I just want, again, for me, the point of a robot, and not hopefully, for me, the point of a robot is to make people's life better on the most direction that you can have. So my life will be easier, so I'll be a better person to other people. So to make this, and if they have conscious or not, then I don't think they need consciousness to do that. And I don't think we will ever know if they have consciousness, because we don't know if a mouse have a consciousness.
And in terms of wording, so then if somebody asks you the question, or if you have to talk about that, will you say appearance of conscience? We are here at Enchanted Tools working on appearance of conscience.
I don't know why would you want to have an appearance of consciousness. Because
the emotion.
No, but no, it's
Is that emotion or appearance of emotion?
No, they don't have, again, okay, you know what, I need a definition. If you can't define what is emotion, and if you cannot define, if you can define emotion, you can program it.
Yeah.
If you can, and I saw you program it. So if you can define consciousness, you can program it. I defined curiosity, and I programmed it. You can disagree with my definition, but if you agree with my definition, then what I programmed is curiosity. So from my perspective, the robot, at one point there was a robot that played tangrams, but it was curious in the sense that it selected the actions to learn most, and it externalized it, and it was happier, and it showed it outside to the child it was playing that it was happier because it was curious. By my definition, I achieved my goal, if you remember the second slide, that I have a robot that explores the environment and is happy about it. So from my perspective, I have a fully curious robot. You can disagree with my definition or with everything, but by my definition, I have a fully curious robot. If you can define emotion, just define, like 3 or 3 sentences, very non-circular definition of emotion, then you can probably program it. And by that definition, you will have emotion.
I fully agree with you, and that's why we are more talking about appearance of
Yeah.
something, because there is an artistic point of view on what it is, and it's more sensible people that are producing something on the robot, and it's nothing else from our
but and again, you also have this problem of people, which are not that intelligent species, but the point is that you can ask people, after some kind of interaction with the robot, whether do you think the robot is happy or and they will say yes. And then you ask them, do you think the robot has motors and has chips and 0 and 1s? And then they will think that yes. And then you'll ask them, so how can they have both? And that's it. You will lost that user. They will not buy a robot anymore. But I mean, the problem is that on the subconscious level, we treat them as if they have emotions. Yeah. Definitely, beyond any doubt. But once we start to think about it rationally, then we know they don't. And the question is, where do you want to be and how do you want to play it? And people don't like disjointed thoughts. They don't like to not agree with themselves, usually. What? They are dissonance. They don't like to be in dissonance. And if you point them to the dissonance, then it won't like you anymore. So the question is how to do that, because you want the robot to be, again, that's also I'll talk about the story. It's like the backstory. So does it make sense? Because obviously there's no planet out there that, but is it okay or not okay? And they just need to not be in this dissonance of doesn't make any sense.
Yes, you're right. And in the past, and in most of the robot, people are not talking so much about how this robot has been invented, where it's coming from. I mean, the mind and some bad roboticists will let people believe that this robot is more than something created by people. You know? So then they can use a puppet effect that make people believe in an AI or believe in a character that actually do not exist by its own. It's just a human production. Yeah. So, and I think scientific research about the grounding of that robot into human production with values coming through that could be very interesting in the people perception, I mean, in the user perception.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
If you take Enchanted Tools apart, what do you think about this humanoid robot race? That all these humanoid robots that we see have different designs. They also have been showcased using different types of storytelling.
Yeah. I didn't see the storytelling of each one of them.
Doing
They're
the
just
dishes,
robots.
Doing the dishes.
That's not storytelling.
Yeah, but it's
That's a very, very expensive dishwasher.
so that's what I wanted you to say.
Yeah, I have a problem with this humanoid robot. My problem is I think they're too good. I think that the advancement is so fast and so rapid that our biggest problem as humans is that we think linearly and technology develops exponentially. And we just can't grasp. We cannot grasp what's going to happen. Yeah, it's a topic for, it's over beer. It's not over this kind of conversation. Yes?
Thank you very much for your talk. Very impressive. I'm very interested in curiosity.
What?
I'm very interested in curiosity.
Yes.
That's your main, the core of the talk. And because I'm interested in a more general way of what is robotics. So robotics can be Milwaukee, but it can be my next car, it can be my clothes, it can be the home. So everything is it's about robotics.
Yeah.
But the core of this is, I think, two things related with curiosity. The first one is decision making. How to take a decision in the real world, and time for given task and so on. And empathy. Empathy, it's to who I'm talking to. Formidable will be back.
Yeah.
It's a specialist of empathy. And because empathy, it's either to be inside of someone.
Yeah.
You say that the two robots, if someone say is doing this, the robot should do
Yeah.
that. But this is not, it's like the mirror. The
Mhm.
real empathy is that if I do this with my right hand, you should do the same
Yeah.
with your right hand. It's not the mirror. So with empathy, you can be, okay, I'm doing something with this kid, or with people that live in this building, or with people that, and so on how I can understand the needs and desires.
So again, yeah. So again, in empathy, it's very interesting. It's like the question is, do people have empathy for robots, and do robots should have empathy for the people, and how to do that? You raised something. I don't know why I heard something which I don't know if you mentioned, but there's something we didn't talk at all about. But I think it should be not now, but raise a question. Is about how robots interact with robots. Like if you have like two of them next to you, what should happen? And I think that's a whole world that is not researched almost at all.
Yeah, but it's very connected to the first point you have, life for its own.
No. It's when you are here, I'm here also, and I have two robots.
Yeah,
Do they talk to one another?
they should. Because
I know, yeah, but I'm just saying it's suddenly everything changes, right? Because you have this weird interaction now. Because there was also a study like if you have like a robot playing ball with you, and then suddenly they don't pass the ball to you anymore. They just pass between one another. And then you feel like bad because they don't include you in their game. And again, they're robots. But again, you suddenly have this weird thing when you have like these two robots around. What happens? And there are a lot of implications to tons of stuff that you can think of. And I think that's actually really, really cool. It opens up even more interaction because instead of human-robot interaction, human-robot-robot interaction, and again, by making them interact in some way, you can make the person interact in a different way. Okay, again, it opens a whole window to another thing. Okay, I think we're done for now. Excellent. Thank you very much. Yay. Excellent. So I'm still here to answer questions on one-on-one if you don't feel enough promoting curiosity to enabling.